JD Vance tried to silence Jasmine Crockett on live TV, but her fierce comeback left him stunned. Sparks fly as they clash on Fox News over voting rights, exposing raw political divides. The lights blaze down on the Fox News set, the air thick, with anticipation as the host, Laura Ingraham, leaned forward, her eyes glinting with the promise of a fiery exchange. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat to the left, her posture composed but her gaze sharp, ready for battle. Across from her, Senator JD Vance adjusted his tie, his smirk barely concealed, exuding the confidence of a man who thought he held the upper hand. The topic? Voting rights, a powder keg in the current political climate, with Crockett pushing for federal protections to counter restrictive state laws, and Vance defending what he called election integrity. The stage was set for a showdown, and the audience, both in the studio and at home, could feel the tension crackling like static before a storm. Ingraham kicked things off, her voice clipped. "Representative Crockett, you've been vocal about so-called voter suppression. But isn't it true that states like Ohio, Senator Vance's home, are just ensuring fair elections with their ID laws?" Crockett didn't miss a beat, her Texas drawl steady but laced with steel. "Laura, let's call it what it is. These laws aren't about fairness. They're about control." In 2024, Texas saw over 1 million voters purged from the rolls, disproportionately Black and Latino. I've got constituents who waited 7 hours to vote because polling places in their neighborhoods were slashed. This isn't integrity. It's a deliberate barrier to democracy. Vance chuckled, leaning back in his chair, his tone dripping with condescension. "Come on, Congresswoman. You're peddling a victim narrative. Ohio's voter ID law is common sense. You need an ID to buy beer, rent a car, board a plane. Why not to vote? Unless you're saying your constituents can't handle basic responsibilities," the studio audience murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. Crockett's eyes narrowed, but she kept her cool, her voice measured. "Senator, I'm saying my constituents are being targeted. In Ohio, your state, 40% of Black voters live in areas with fewer polling locations per capita than white areas. That's not a coincidence. It's a strategy. And let's not pretend ID laws are neutral. They hit hardest at low-income folks, seniors and students who might not have the means or time to jump through your hoops." Vance leaned forward, his smirk fading, replaced by a hard edge. "You're dodging the point. If people can't manage an ID, maybe they shouldn't be deciding the future of this country. Voting's a privilege, not a free-for-all," the audience gasped, and Ingraham's eyebrows shot up, sensing blood in the water. Crockett's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. "A privilege? Senator? Voting is a right, hard won by folks who bled for it. My grandmother marched in Selma, saw dogs turned on her friends. Also, people like me could have a voice. You're sitting here saying her sacrifice was just a privilege? That's not just wrong. It's disrespectful." Vance's face reddened, but he doubled down, his voice rising. "Don't lecture me about sacrifice. I grew up in Appalachia, saw my community gutted by bad policies from people who claim to speak for the marginalized. Your party's just exploiting race to scare up votes. And you know it." Crockett's lips curled into a tight smile, but her eyes burned. "Exploiting? Senator, I'm not the one fear-mongering about illegals voting to rile up your base. You're out here pushing myths with no evidence. 0 cases of widespread voter fraud in Ohio or anywhere else. But you keep beating that drum because it keeps folks angry and distracted." Ingraham jumped in, trying to steer the conversation. "Let's keep this civil, folks. Senator, you've said voter ID laws protect trust in elections. Can you respond to the Congresswoman's data?" Vance ignored her, locking eyes with Crockett. "You want to talk data? Fine. In 2024, Ohio's turnout was up 3% with ID laws in place. People showed up, they voted, no issues. Your sob stories don't hold up." Crockett shook her head, her voice low but cutting. "Turnout's not the whole story, and you know it. Your laws didn't stop everyone, but they made it harder for some, specifically those least likely to vote for you. That's the game, isn't it? Stack the deck, then call it fair." The audience erupted, some cheering, others booing, as Ingraham struggled to regain control. Vance's composure was slipping, his fingers tapping the armrest, clearly rattled by Crockett's precision. She wasn't just holding her ground. She was pushing him into a corner, and he didn't like it. "You're accusing me of rigging elections?" Vance snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That's a bold claim, Congresswoman. You got proof? Or is this just more of your party's conspiracy nonsense?" Crockett leaned forward, her voice calm but loaded with intent. "Proof. I've got stories from real people, Senator. Like Ms. Loretta in Dallas, who's 78, no driver's license, and couldn't get to a DMV 30 miles away to vote. You want to tell her she's a conspiracy?" Vance opened his mouth, but no words came out, his silence deafening in the charged atmosphere. The camera zoomed in, catching the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Crockett wasn't done, and the room could feel it. She was building to something bigger, something that could turn this debate upside down. The Fox News cameras lingered on JD Vance's frozen expression, his hesitation hanging heavy in the studio. Jasmine Crockett's words had landed like a sledgehammer, and the audience leaned forward, sensing the tide turning. Laura Ingraham, ever the opportunist, tried to pivot, her voice sharp. "Congresswoman, you're making serious accusations. Let's give the senator a chance to respond." Crockett didn't break eye contact with Vance, her gaze unwavering. "Oh, I'm happy to hear his response, Laura. I'm just waiting for him to find his voice." The crowd erupted in a mix of laughter and jeers, the energy tilting in her favor. Vance's jaw clenched, his earlier swagger replaced by a barely concealed scowl. He wasn't used to being outmaneuvered, especially not on live TV. Vance cleared his throat, forcing a thin smile. "Congresswoman, you're good at stories. I'll give you that. But let's stick to facts. You're saying voter ID laws are some grand scheme to disenfranchise people. Where's the evidence? You've got anecdotes, sure, but no hard data showing these laws stop legitimate voters." Crockett raised an eyebrow, her tone cool but biting. "No hard data? Senator, I brought receipts." The Brennan Center found that 11% of eligible voters, 21 million Americans, lack a government-issued photo ID. In Black and Latino communities, that number's closer to 25%. You're telling me a quarter of my constituents don't matter because they can't afford a trip to the DMV? That's not a flaw in your system, it's the design." The audience roared, some clapping, others shouting. Ingraham raised a hand, trying to quell the noise, but Crockett was on a roll. "And let's talk about your state, Senator. Ohio's own data shows 8% of voters in urban areas couldn't vote in 2024 because of ID issues or polling place access. That's thousands of voices silenced. You call that democracy?" Vance's face tightened, his voice rising. "You're twisting numbers to fit your narrative. Those people could have gotten IDs if they tried." "Ohio offers free IDs, Congresswoman." "Free? If they didn't bother, that's on them, not me." Crockett's smile was razor-sharp. "Free? Senator, you know better. Your free IDs require a birth certificate, which costs money. You need an address, but what about the homeless? Or students who move every year? You're acting like everyone's got the time, money, and transportation to navigate your bureaucracy. My cousin, a single mom working 2 jobs, couldn't take a day off to chase your free ID. You saying she doesn't deserve a vote?" The crowd's reaction was visceral, cheers drowning out Ingraham's attempt to interject. Vance shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming the armrest. "You're making excuses," he snapped. "If people want to vote, they'll figure it out. We can't lower the bar just because some folks won't step up." Crockett's eyes flashed, her voice dropping to a dangerous calm. "Lower the bar? Senator, the bar's already sky high for some and a speed bump for others. My district's got seniors who've voted for decades, now turned away because their IDs expired and the nearest DMV is an hour's bus ride. You're not protecting elections. You're picking winners. Ingraham jumped in, sensing Vance's struggle. Senator, let's shift gears. You've said federal voting laws, like the ones Congresswoman Crockett supports, overstep state rights. Can you elaborate? Vance seized the lifeline, his tone smug. Absolutely. States like Ohio know their voters best. We don't need Washington bureaucrats, especially ones pushing agendas, telling us how to run our elections. Your bill, Congresswoman, would force every state to adopt same-day registration, no questions asked. That's a recipe for chaos, and you know it. Crockett didn't blink. Chaos? Senator, the only chaos is what your laws are causing. Same-day registration works in 22 states, including some red ones. It boosts turnout without a single shred of evidence. It leads to fraud. You're not worried about chaos. You're worried about more people voting. Period. The audience exploded again, and Vance's composure cracked. You're accusing me of suppressing votes? He shouted, pointing a finger. That's slander, and I'm not here for it. You want to talk? Real issues or just keep grandstanding? Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady but laced with fire. Slander? I'm stating facts, Senator. You're the one dodging. You haven't answered for Ms. Loretta or my cousin or the thousands turned away in your state. You want real issues? How about the real reason you're pushing these laws? To keep power in the hands of folks who look like you. The studio went silent, the weight of her words sinking in. Vance's face flushed, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Ingraham's eyes widened, but before she could speak, Crockett pressed on. You're not fooling anyone, Senator. This isn't about IDs or integrity. It's about control, and I'm not here to let you spin it. Vance slammed his hand on the armrest, his voice booming. You don't get to lecture me about control. Your party's been rigging the system for years, and I'm done listening to this nonsense. The crowd gasped, and Ingraham's voice cut through. We'll be right back after this. But the cameras didn't cut, and Vance's outburst hung in the air, raw and unfiltered. Crockett sat back, her expression calm but her eyes locked on him, daring him to keep digging his grave. The Fox News studio buzzed with raw energy, the crowd still reeling from JD Vance's outburst. His accusation that Crockett's party was rigging the system echoed in the tense silence. But the cameras, defying Laura Ingraham's call for a break, stayed live, capturing every second. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, her calm demeanor, a stark contrast to Vance's reddening face, his hands gripping the armrests like a man clinging to a sinking ship. Her steady gaze seemed to pin him in place, daring him to unravel further. Ingraham, visibly flustered, tried to regain control. Senator, Congresswoman, let's keep this productive. Senator, you were saying? Vance, his voice tight with barely contained fury, pointed at Crockett. I'm saying she's got no business accusing me of suppressing votes when her side's been pushing for unchecked power grabs. Same-day registration, mail-in ballots with no oversight. That's how you steal elections, not with voter IDs. The audience murmured, some nodding, others booing softly. Crockett tilted her head, her lips curling into a faint, knowing smile. Steal elections? Senator, you're throwing around claims with nothing to back them up. The 2024 election had over 60 lawsuits alleging fraud. Your side lost every single one. Courts, including Republican judges, found no evidence. Zero. But you're still out here scaring folks with ghost stories about stolen votes. Vance scoffed, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Oh, please. You think courts always get it right? The system's broken, and your party's exploiting it. You want every Tom, Dick, and Harry voting without proving who they are. That's not democracy. That's chaos. Crockett's eyes narrowed, her voice low and deliberate. Chaos? Senator, the only chaos is what your laws create. You keep talking about proving who they are, but let's talk about who's really getting erased. In Ohio, 15% of polling places in black neighborhoods closed since 2020. Coincidence? Or is it because those voters don't tend to check your box? My people are proving who they are every day, fighting to be heard while you stack the deck. The crowd roared, some cheering, others shouting in protest. Ingraham raised her voice. Congresswoman, you're implying intent. That's a heavy charge. Senator, how do you respond? Vance leaned forward, his voice sharp. I'm not implying anything. I'm saying it outright. Her party's banking on low-information voters who'll pull the lever for them without question. That's why they want no rules, no standards. It's not about access. It's about power. Crockett laughed, a short, cutting sound that silenced the room. Low-information voters? Senator, you're talking about my constituents, my family, my community. The audacity to sit there and call them uninformed when they're out here living the consequences of your policies. You don't get. To disrespect them and call it principle. Vance's face twisted, his voice rising. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying we need voters who understand what's at stake, not people swayed by emotional stories or handouts. Your whole argument's built on feelings, not facts. Crockett's composure held, but her words cut like a blade. Feelings? Senator, I'm giving you data. 21 million Americans without IDs, 8% of Ohio voters blocked by your laws. You're the one leaning on feelings, stoking fear about fraud with no proof. And let's talk about stakes. My district's got kids going hungry, parents working 3 jobs, and you're out here making it harder for them to have a say. That's what's at stake. The audience erupted, applause mixing with jeers. Ingraham tried to interject, but Crockett wasn't done. You want to talk power? Let's talk about your donors, Senator. The ones bankrolling your campaign while you push laws that keep their taxes low and their influence high. You're not protecting voters. You're protecting your paycheck. Vance's eyes widened, his voice booming. That's a low blow, and you know it. You're deflecting because you can't defend your position. Your party's been bought by coastal elites, and you're out here pretending to be the voice of the people? Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady but fierce. Deflect? I'm right here, Senator, answering every jab you throw. You're the one dodging Ms. Loretta, dodging my cousin, dodging the numbers. You can't face the truth. Your laws aren't about fairness. They're about keeping certain folks out of the booth. The studio was electric. The crowd, hanging on every word. Vance's hands shook slightly, his frustration boiling over. You're out of line, he snapped. I'm not sitting here to be slandered by someone who twists everything to fit her agenda. You want a real debate? Bring facts, not fairy tales. Crockett's smile was ice cold. Fairy tales? Senator, I'm bringing reality, my people's reality. You're the one spinning tales about fraud to justify your power grab. And the worst part? You know it's a lie, but you're too deep to turn back. Vance's face flushed crimson, his voice a near shout. You're calling me a liar on national TV? You've got some nerve, Congresswoman, the crowd gasped, and Ingraham's voice cracked as she tried to intervene. Let's take a breath here. But Vance wasn't listening. His eyes locked on Crockett, who sat unshaken, her calm a weapon in itself. The tension was unbearable, and everyone knew this was far from over. The Fox News studio was a pressure cooker, the air thick with the fallout of JD Vance's accusation. His eyes burned into Jasmine Crockett, who sat serene, her unshakable calm, a stark contrast to his barely contained rage. Laura Ingraham's plea for a pause hung unanswered, the crowd's gasps fading into a restless hum. The cameras, still rolling, caught every flicker of emotion. Vance's clenched fists, Crockett's steady gaze, and Ingraham's strained smile as she tried to wrangle the chaos. Senator, Congresswoman, let's focus, Ingraham said, her voice tight. This is a debate, not a shouting match. Crockett tilted her head, her tone smooth but laced with steel. I'm focused, Laura. I'm just waiting for the senator to answer for calling me a liar while dodging every fact I've laid out. He's got a lot to say about my nerve, but not much about the truth. The audience erupted, cheers mixing. With boos, the divide in the room palpable. Vance's face twitched, his voice low and venomous. You want truth? The truth is your party's desperate to flood the polls with votes that don't belong. And you're here dressing it up as justice. I'm not dodging. I'm calling it out. Crockett's laugh was sharp, cutting through the noise. Flood the polls? Senator, you're recycling tired talking points with no backbone. I've given you data. 21 million Americans without IDs. 15% of polling places gone in Ohio's black neighborhoods. You've given me nothing but hot air. If you're calling me out, at least bring something real. Vance slammed his hand on the armrest, his voice rising. Real? I'm real about protecting this country from people who'd rather cry victim than take responsibility. You're not fighting for justice. You're fighting for power, and I'm sick of hearing it. The crowd roared, some cheering Vance's defiance, others shouting support for Crockett. Ingraham raised both hands, her voice shrill. Enough, Senator. Respond to her data, not her character. Vance ignored her, leaning toward Crockett. Your data's cherry-picked. Ohio's voter turnout was up in 2024, IDs and all. People voted. Your sob stories about Ms. Whoever don't change that. Crockett's eyes flashed, but her voice stayed steady. Ms. Loretta's not a sob story. She's a voter you wrote off. Turnout's up? Sure, for those who could jump your hurdles. But thousands didn't, and you know it. You're not protecting elections. You're curating them, picking who gets a voice and who doesn't. The audience's reaction was deafening, applause drowning out Ingraham's attempt to speak. Crockett pressed on, her voice rising with conviction. I'm here for my people. Ms. Loretta, my cousin, every senior, student, and worker your laws push out. They're not victims. They're fighters. And I'll keep fighting for them, whether you like it or not. Vance's face was a mask of fury, his words spitting out. You're not fighting for anyone but yourself. This is all a performance, and I'm done playing along with your sanctimonious act. Crockett leaned forward, her voice a quiet blade. A performance? Senator, I'm here with facts, stories, and the weight of my community's struggle. You're the one performing, dodging questions and hiding behind insults. If you're done, then step up or step out. The studio froze, the crowd holding its breath. Vance's mouth opened, but no words came, his silence a glaring admission of defeat. Ingraham stammered, Senator, do you have a response? But Vance just glared, his chest heaving. Then, abruptly, he ripped off his mic, the feedback screeching through the studio. I'm not wasting my time with this, he snapped, standing, and storming off the set, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. The audience exploded, cheers and jeers colliding as Ingraham scrambled to fill the void. We'll continue after this, she said, but the cameras stayed on. Crockett, who sat back, her expression calm but triumphant. She adjusted her jacket, a faint smile playing on her lips, as if she'd known this moment was coming. Ingraham turned to her, grasping for control. Congresswoman, any final thoughts? Crockett looked straight into the camera, her voice clear and unwavering. This isn't about me or him, it's about the people we serve. My constituents, your viewers, they deserve a vote no matter who they are. I came here to speak for them, and I'll keep speaking, no matter who walks away. The crowd's applause was thunderous, carrying the weight of her words beyond the studio. As Ingraham rushed to wrap up, the cameras lingered on Crockett, her poise unshaken, her message undeniable. The clip of Vance's exit and Crockett's final words hit the internet within minutes, racking up millions of views. Hashtags trended, comments poured in, and the conversation ignited. Her powerful stand, resonating far beyond the Fox News set, a testament to her unyielding fight for those she served.